She drew her shawl tighter as gunfire split the desert silence. He stepped from the mesquite shadows only to end a crime he once might have joined. That choice cracked something open in both of them. Martha Wade and Cole Harding were bound by loss, but danger forced them into the same breath again. By morning, one cup of coffee would carry more promise than either dared to speak. The crack of rifles rolled across the flats like thunder looking for somewhere to land. Dust rose in yellow sheets as the stagecoach lurched, one wheel biting deep into a rut. The driver yelled, reins snapping, but the team panicked, their eyes white in the noon glare. A masked rider fired again, shattering the lantern glass at the coach door. Inside, Martha Wade clutched the satchel on her lap, breath tight, heart hammering. She had lived through this once before. Only that time her husband hadn't. From a rocky rise half a mile away, Cole Harding watched the ambush unfold. He hadn't planned to care. He was just another drifter headed nowhere, his horse sore-footed, his conscience heavier than the colt on his hip. But when he saw the riders closing on the coach, something old and mean twisted in his gut. He recognized the lead bandit's stance, the tilt of his hat, the easy cruelty in the way he fired low to scare rather than kill. Buck Wells, Cole cursed under his breath. He'd ridden with Buck once, back before he'd learned what dying men sounded like. He thought he'd buried that part of himself along with the wanted posters. But the woman's scream cut through the wind, thin and terrified, and it broke what little peace he'd made with doing nothing. He kicked his horse hard. Gravel exploded under hooves as he tore down the ridge, rifle drawn. The first shot dropped a bandit clean off his saddle. The second sent another scrambling for cover. The coach horses reared, nearly toppling the rig, but Cole swung alongside, grabbing the lead line and steadying them with a harsh yell. "Keep your head down," he barked toward the window. For a blink he saw her, hair loose, face pale, eyes wide but steady. Then another bullet sparked off the coach frame, forcing him flat against the wheel. Buck's voice carried over the chaos, low and mocking. "Ain't this something, Harding?" "Thought you were done playing hero," Cole answered with gunfire. The last outlaw turned tail. Buck's horse spun and bolted toward the far ridge. Cole didn't chase. The echo of hoofbeats faded into the canyon and left only wind and the raw smell of powder. He dismounted, breath burning in his chest, and pulled open the coach door. "You hurt, ma'am?" Martha's fingers shook around the small revolver she'd never fired. "Just scared," she whispered. Then realizing, You stopped them." "Guess I did." He holstered his gun, glancing toward the horizon where Buck had vanished. "They'll be back." The driver climbed down, babbling thanks and half-prayers, but Cole barely heard. He saw the scorch on the coach door, the bullet grooves, the blood on his own sleeve that wasn't all his. Martha followed his stare. "You're wounded," he shrugged. "Not enough to matter." By dusk they reached Dry Creek, a huddle of boards and dust at the end of the telegraph line. The sheriff's office leaned sideways like it was tired of standing guard. Cole handed Martha down from the coach. For a moment her hand stayed in his, a small trembling thing that didn't want to let go. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet." He tipped his hat and turned toward the hitch rail. "You best tell the sheriff who did this." "Name's Buck Wells," her brow lifted. "You know him?" "Used to." The single word carried every mile of regret he'd ridden since. The sheriff limped out onto the boardwalk, gray hair flattened by sweat. "Heard shots." "Harding, that you?" "Yeah," Cole said quietly. "Stage got hit west of the pass. Buck's behind it." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "You sure you want to stir that hornet's nest again?" Cole's jaw worked once before he answered. "Didn't mean to. Just couldn't watch." Martha stood nearby, watching him with something caught between fear and gratitude. The sun dipped, bleeding red across the street, painting the dust like fire. Cole turned to leave, meaning to disappear before dawn the way he always did, but her voice stopped him. "Mr. Harding, you saved my life. At least let me buy you coffee in the morning." He hesitated, half smiling despite himself. "Ma'am, I don't reckon coffee fixes much." "Maybe not," she said softly. "But it's a start." Cole looked down the empty street, the saloon shutters creaking, the church bell rusted silent. A town half asleep, same as he'd been for years. He nodded once. "All right then, morning." He stepped into the gathering dark, unaware that the woman's promise would outlast the gunfire. The dawn came colorless over Dry Creek. the light thin and dusty as if afraid to wake the town. A single stovepipe sent up smoke from the cafe by the livery, carrying the smell of burnt beans and weak coffee. Cole Harding sat alone on the porch rail outside the sheriff's office, hat tipped low, trying to convince himself last night had been just another job of trouble that didn't belong to him. But the echo of that woman's voice, "At least let me buy you coffee in the morning," refused to fade. He heard her before he saw her. The soft scrape of boots, the hesitant rhythm of someone unused to walking dusty streets this early. Martha Wade came carrying 2 tin mugs, steam curling upward like ghost smoke. She wore the same dark dress from the stage, cleaned and pressed, her auburn hair pinned loosely, a stubborn strand falling near her cheek. "Morning," she said. Cole lifted his hat, unsure whether to stand. "Didn't think you meant it." "I don't say things I don't mean." She handed him a mug, careful not to meet his eyes. "Strong enough to wake the dead," Edie says. He took it, the metal hot against his palm. "Guess I'm halfway there then." For a long stretch they drank in silence, listening to the wagons creak awake. The rooster behind the blacksmith's pen announced the day. A dust devil danced briefly across the street, caught a scrap of paper and disappeared. "You from the territories?" Martha asked finally. "Used to be," Cole said. "Then I started running from him." She studied him over her cup. "You don't look like a man who runs." "Depends what's chasing." He set the mug down on the rail, eyes fixed on the far ridge. "Buck Wells won't forget yesterday. He'll come looking. Men like him always come looking." Martha's hands tightened around her cup. "Why'd you help us then?" "You could have ridden on." Cole thought of answering easy, couldn't stand the noise, but the truth slipped out quieter. "Because I used to be on the other side of that gun." The confession hung there, dry as the air itself. Martha didn't flinch. "Then maybe yesterday wasn't about what you used to be." The saloon doors clapped open across the street. Sheriff Finn shuffled out, rubbing his temples. "Harding," he called, voice rough. "Need a word." Cole rose, tipping his hat to Martha. "Coffee's good." "Tell Edie she ought to charge more." "I made it," she said softly. "And you're welcome." Inside the office, the sheriff laid out a crumpled telegram. Wells sighted north of Dry Creek, 3 riders with him. Cole read it once, jaw tightening. Figured he wouldn't wait long. "You aiming to stay out of it this time?" Finn asked. Cole hesitated, then looked through the window where Martha stood speaking with the cafe girl. Her laughter, light, nervous, floated faintly across the street. Something in it pulled at the quiet place he'd built inside himself. "No," he said finally. "I reckon I'm in it now." By mid-morning he was out by the corral, checking his rifle and oiling the cylinder. The sun burned off the chill, leaving that sharp desert clarity where sound traveled far. Martha approached again, hesitant but resolute. "I heard what the sheriff said," she began. "If those men come back, they won't find you," Cole cut in. She shook her head. "You can't fight 3 alone." He half smiled. "You don't know how quiet this place gets when I'm trying." Her eyes glistened, half fear, half something else. "Then let me help. I can load, I can keep watch." "No." His voice softened. "You've done enough surviving. Let me do the fighting for once." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she reached into her satchel and set a folded cloth beside him. Fresh bandages, neatly rolled. "In case your kind of quiet gets loud again," she murmured. Cole met her gaze, the first hint of warmth slipping past his guard. "You sure you're not a preacher?" "I lost faith in sermons," she said, "but not in people." When she turned to leave, the light caught the copper in her hair, and Cole watched until she vanished into the cafe's shadow. The air smelled of horses, iron, and faintly coffee. He holstered his gun, shoulders squaring against the day. Somewhere beyond the ridge, Buck Wells was riding closer, bringing the past with him. Cole finished the last sip from her mug, the taste bitter and grounding, and muttered to himself, "Guess forever starts messy." By the time the sun reached its cruelest height, Dry Creek had gone still. The kind of silence that hummed before trouble. Dogs hid under porches. The wind dragged grit across empty boards. Cole Harding stood outside the livery, hat brim low, rifle resting across his arm, eyes on the northern trail. He'd spent the morning tightening the stirrup leathers, checking the sights, waiting. Sheriff Finn shuffled beside him, revolver loose at his hip. "You sure he's coming?" Cole didn't answer right away. He heard it first, the faint rhythm of hooves, distant but steady. "Yeah," he said finally. He's coming! 3 riders crested the ridge, silhouettes swallowed by heat shimmer. The one in front rode taller than the rest, coat black despite the sun, a swagger that didn't need announcing. Buck Wells, Cole's jaw flexed. "When this starts, stay behind the trough," he told the sheriff. Finn grunted. "I may be old, son, but I ain't furniture." "Didn't say you were," Cole said. "Just don't want to bury the only law left in this town." Across the street, the cafe door cracked open. Martha Wade stood in the frame, apron dusted with flour, eyes locked on the road. Cole caught her gaze for half a second, enough to say, "Stay inside," without words. She didn't. The riders slowed as they entered town, hooves drumming dull against hardpan. Buck grinned like he'd already won. "Well, if it ain't the righteous Cole Harding," he called, voice echoing off storefronts. "Didn't expect to find you guarding teapots and widows." Cole stepped forward, rifle hanging easy but ready. "You should have kept riding," Buck laughed. "You stole my haul. Killed my men. You think I'd ride on and let that sit?" "I didn't kill your men," Cole said evenly. "They killed their chances when they drew first." Buck's grin thinned. "Same old talk. You always were good at dressing guilt in fancy words." He glanced toward the cafe. "That her? The lady you played hero for?" Cole's shoulders went rigid. "Don't." Buck's horse sidestepped, restless under the tension. "What?" "Just making conversation." He turned his head slightly to his men. "Go on, check the place. Maybe she's got silver or gratitude left over." Before they could move, Cole fired. The first shot cracked the quiet apart. One of Buck's men dropped, his boot catching in the stirrup as the horse bolted. The second fired wild, the bullet chewing splinters off the water trough. Sheriff Finn ducked behind it with a muttered curse. Buck swung off his horse, revolver blazing. Cole dove for cover behind the hitch rail, glass shattering somewhere behind him. Martha screamed once, the sound raw and furious. The exchange was short but brutal. Dust, smoke, gunfire, silence. When it cleared, Buck stood alone, a streak of blood down his sleeve, hatred bright in his eyes. "You always think you're better," he rasped, advancing. "You kill men, same as me. Difference is," Cole said, stepping out slow, rifle steady. "I quit pretending it was right." Buck's gun came up. Cole fired first. The shot slammed him backward into the dust, echo fading slow into nothing. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the wind returned, curling through the empty street. Sheriff Finn straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. "Hell of a morning." Cole lowered his rifle, breathing hard. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of old ghosts finally finished. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Hell of an ending, too." The cafe door creaked again. Martha stepped out, eyes wide, skirt hem catching the dust. "Is it over?" Cole nodded. "For now." She looked past him at Buck's still body, then back at Cole. "You didn't have to stay, you know." He holstered his gun, voice low. "Didn't know how to leave." Martha approached slowly, close enough that the scent of coffee and flour drifted between them. "Then maybe," she said softly, "you don't have to." Cole looked at her, really looked. And for the first time in years, the emptiness behind his eyes flickered with something alive. The day after the gunfire, Dry Creek breathed again. Wind pushed the last curls of gun smoke down the street, stirring dust into lazy swirls that caught the sunlight like ghosts too tired to haunt. The townsfolk drifted back from behind shutters and barrels, whispering in voices that sounded more like prayers than gossip. Cole Harding sat on the edge of the water trough, hat off, hair damp where he'd splashed away the sweat and blood. His knuckles were raw, the back of his shirt torn, but his eyes were calm. The sheriff's men had carried Buck Wells out past the ridge before dawn, wrapped in canvas and silence. Cole didn't watch them go. He'd said his goodbyes to the past with the pull of a trigger, now quiet pressed close, almost unfamiliar. He didn't quite know what to do with it. Across the street, the cafe door opened. Martha Wade stepped out, apron freshly washed, her hands holding 2 cups that steamed against the morning chill. Her gaze found him immediately. No fear this time, just something cautious, almost tender. "Coffee," she called. "You look like you need it," Cole managed half a smile. "Starting to think that's your answer for everything." "Sometimes it works." She crossed the street, skirts brushing the dust, the smell of roasted beans following her like comfort. She handed him 1 cup and sat beside him on the trough's edge without asking. The street stretched silent before them, still scarred with bullet marks and hoof tracks. "Town's already talking," she said softly. "They think you saved us all." He stared into his cup. "I just ended what I started years ago." Martha looked at him over the rim of her mug. Seems to me you ended what he started. For a moment, the only sound was the hiss of wind through dry grass. Sheriff Finn limped past, tipping his hat toward Martha. Ma'am, coffee smells better than justice today. Justice rarely smells like much, she replied with a faint smile. Cole chuckled under his breath. He's right, though. It does smell good. You staying? She asked suddenly. He hesitated, thumb tracing the rim of his cup. I don't know. Never been much good at staying anywhere. Then maybe try this time. Her words weren't an order, but they hung in the air with the weight of one. Cole glanced at her hand resting near his on the wood rail, steady, ungloved, freckled from sun. You think a man like me fits in a place like this? Martha's answer came quiet but sure. Maybe a place like this needs a man like you. Somebody who knows what trouble looks like before it gets here. He wanted to argue, but the stubborn curve of her mouth made him grin instead. You don't scare easy, do you? Lost that luxury, she said simply. But I do believe in second chances, even when they walk around pretending they don't need one. Cole looked down the street where the last trail of dust had already faded. Maybe I'll stay till morning, he said. That's what you said yesterday. Guess I'm bad at leaving on time. Martha smiled into her cup. Then I'll keep the coffee hot. For a while, they just sat there, two survivors with nothing left to outrun. The town's noise slowly returned. Hammer strikes from the smithy, a mule's impatient bray, the clink of glass in the saloon window. Normal life, fragile and new. Cole took a long drink, letting the bitter warmth settle deep. You know, he murmured, I don't remember the last time morning didn't feel like punishment. Then let it start here, she said. He turned toward her, the sun catching the faint line of a smile she didn't try to hide. Somewhere behind them the church bell rang once, clear, unhurried, as if marking a new hour instead of an ending. Cole set his cup down beside hers. Guess I'll stay longer than morning. Good, Martha said softly. I was hoping you would. The breeze carried the smell of coffee, wood smoke, and the quiet promise of something worth staying for. Weeks passed before anyone in Dry Creek stopped glancing toward the ridge at sunset. The land healed slow, burned fences mended, bullet holes patched, and rumor fading like dust after rain. But inside the small cafe at the corner of Main and Mill, the mornings had started to sound different. Cole Harding was there most dawns, sweeping the porch before the first wagons rolled through, hat tilted back, a mug already waiting for him. Sometimes he'd fix the hitch rail or oil the cafe's front hinges without being asked. No one called him hero. They just nodded when they passed. The town seemed to understand quiet gratitude better than loud praise. Inside, Martha Wade worked behind the counter, sleeves rolled to her elbows, her laugh returning in small pieces. She'd bought the cafe from the old owner with the little money she had and a lot of courage. The sign above the door now read Wade's Place. Folks came for her coffee, stayed for her kindness, and whispered that maybe Dry Creek wasn't such a dying town after all. Cole didn't belong anywhere easy, but here the silence didn't itch. He'd help with deliveries, fix wagon axles, teach the stable boy how to aim straight with a Winchester too big for his frame. At night, he'd sit on the porch rail, watching the lamplight spill through the cafe window where Martha cleaned counters, her hair slipping loose from its pins. Sometimes she caught him looking. Sometimes she didn't pretend not to notice. One evening, as twilight folded over the desert, Martha stepped out carrying 2 cups. Figured you'd be needing this, she said. He smiled faintly. Can't remember the last time I went a day without your coffee. Good, she teased. Means I'm doing something right. They drank in easy quiet. The air smelled of sage and horses, the sky blushing low behind the buttes. After a while, she said, You ever think about leaving again? Cole swirled the coffee, watching the dark ripple. Every morning, he admitted. And every morning I don't. Why not? He looked at her, really looked. The steadiness in her eyes, the faint scar on her knuckle from some long-forgotten hardship. Because the road doesn't have your kind of quiet, he said softly. Just more ghosts, she smiled, small and sure. Then stay a little longer. He nodded. Reckon I already have. That night, thunder grumbled far off in the hills, a storm too distant to fear, close enough to feel alive. Rain came gentle, tapping the windows like cautious fingers. Inside, the cafe glowed warm, lamplight gold against the walls. Martha stood at the counter drying cups. Cole sat nearby, boot heels hooked on the chair rung, watching the fire wink in the stove. "You ever miss the road?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "But then I remember the coffee's worse out there." Martha laughed, a sound that filled the small room and settled something deep in both of them. She poured another cup and handed it across the table. Their fingers brushed, just a fleeting touch, but it lingered. "Here's to second chances," she whispered. Cole raised the mug. "And to the woman stubborn enough to hand one to me." Rain thickened outside, silver threads against the window pane. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers this time, no hesitation. The storm hummed like a low song, and the cafe smelled of earth and coffee and quiet trust. "Tomorrow," Martha said, voice soft but steady. "I'll make biscuits to go with it." "Tomorrow," he echoed, squeezing her hand lightly. "I'll be here." Outside, Dry Creek slept under the clean sound of rain. Inside, two weary hearts rested finally in the same rhythm, the gunfire long gone, the morning light already waiting behind the clouds.